Okay. Okay. So, um, today I just wanted to talk about. Well, I guess I don't really need to. I can just. So, the first thing with plants and people is that plants have been integrated into human life since essentially the dawn of creation, or the dawn of existence, or whatever you want to call it, right? Um, I shouldn't say it like that. So, plants have actually been part of human civilization, well, since civilization began. See, the emergence of agriculture is actually the fundamental cornerstone as to why we were able to start civilization as a society. And what's interesting is that it only happened at most around 10-ish thousand years ago, which isn't very long if you consider how long humans have existed. And so for 10,000 years, and that's in parts of Asia, in the Americas, it actually started around 5 to 6 thousand years ago. And I guess what's really interesting is that it the emergence of agriculture, or agriculture as a technology, started independently, right? So that means one culture developed it, and then without any knowledge of them developing it, another culture developed it. And so there is no real home of agriculture. It has simply just been ingrained in human existence, or at least civilized human existence. And so what's interesting is that we as a species were able to change our lifestyle based off of that and actually gain a lot more leisure time, because instead of putting in X amount of time to have a probability of getting food, we're able to put that same amount of time and increase the probability of us getting food, which means we either have one, we have to put in less time to get food, or two, put in the same amount of food, or put in the same amount of time and get possibly the same amount of food. Um, so I think that's really interesting. That's really fascinating. But what's really, really cool is that all of the first agricultural civilizations grew carbs, right? That's not carbs. That is cards. All of the civilizations grew carbs. Um, the one difference in the types of carbs is actually the um, Incan civilization in Peru. They actually cultivated potatoes, but the other carbs were all grasses. And you can see this in the form of corn, rye, wheat, um, rice, barley. What else is there? Bamboo. Bamboo is another food source. Um, but the key component is that they're all carbs and they're all grasses. And I think that's really interesting because civilization revolves around carbohydrates as we understand it today. And so it's not just that plants have allowed us to create civilization, which allows us to increase the chances that we can survive. It also increases our survival chances through medicine. Plants have been used as medicine far longer than we have a history of. And what's really interesting is that it wasn't until relatively recent that we would start to use synthetic compounds or man made chemicals as a way to heal people. It's been our entire existence that we would use plants as a form of medicine. Now, I will say that there are some benefits, right? So with plants, there's a lot of compounds in the plant, And some of those may have adverse reactions to some people, which is why it has been beneficial to find specific compounds to give to people and then see what's safe and what's not safe. But ultimately, it is important to just realize that we as a species grew up with plants as medicine, right? We've done that our entire life as a species. And so I think it's really important to at least recognize that plant medicine is the normal medicine, and the alternative medicine or untraditional medicine is actually chemical compounds. So that's a little bit of a propaganda piece. But what's fascinating is that plants help our survival chances not just through food, but also through medicine. And so the other side of it then is that while we're able to live more, we've also developed a strong appreciation for plants in the form of aesthetics. So some of the longer cultivated plants were actually flowering plants, from azaleas to chrysanthemums. These were some of the oldest cultivated plants, far beyond the cultivation of plants for food in agriculture. These were cultivation of plants for aesthetics, and that history is far longer than agriculture. And so, what I think is just interesting is that we still use that today. We still have gardens, we still have places that we dedicate to having plants so that we can enjoy them. And I think that that is just simply ingrained in our being. It's ingrained in us as a species, is that there are plants that we should be around to enjoy. Not necessarily that they're doing a specific thing other than just bringing us joy. And so that's part of the reason that I'm very fond of plants. Um, Food, we mentioned food for agriculture, and the last one is actually recreation. So plants as recreation kind of goes hand to hand with aesthetics, but the other side of it is that we actually have cultivated plants for various forms of recreation. Um, the first one I'm sure that's on everyone's mind right now is actually drugs. So we've cultivated so many different plants for drug use, whether it's to relax or to stimulate us or to increase dopamine or whatever it may be. We've been using plants for um, narcotic recreation for thousands of years. The other side of it is that we actually have cultivated some plants or used some plants for various sports, which is another form of recreation. And so we've used wood for bats, we've used cork in balls, we'll dedicate entire spaces to be a managed lawn or managed turf for various games, whether it's badminton or if it's um, what is it? It's not called jockeying. What is when you ride the horse? Horse racing. Oh my god, I'm stupid. We've cultivated it for football, soccer, all sorts of different sports, and so that's another form of recreation. Is that we've used this grass, which is kind of fun that we're still using grass for many different things. We've used grass for our enjoyment of life. And so it's not just in sports or drug use, but it's also in recreation as meditation or recreation as spiritual journeys. There's been labyrinths inside of gardens for hundreds of years. And so it's just really cool to me that plants are just incredibly tied to human like existence. Everything can go back to plants in some way, and it's just cool. It's just really cool. Um, and so a quick note about food is that it's not just about eating for survival, we as a species has done something unique with food, and I think that's one of the things that makes us human, which is entirely conjecture. I have no reason to like say that in terms of like research. So, in my personal opinion, um, I think one of the privileges of humans, or one of the things that makes humans human, is our use of, of food, not just as a way to nourish us, but as a way of cultural connection and as a way of interaction, right? So we took, let's just say we took corn. Instead of just eating it, we've learned to grind it up, add lime, and turn it into um, uh, maize. And with that, we created tacos and papusas and various different forms of food, which in like the in Central America and South American parts of North America, like the through line is, let's say, taco tortillas. The through line is tortillas, but the way each like culture or each area or each region produces or makes and eats these foods is a little bit different. And because of that, like you traveling allows you to experience the heritage and the cultures from these different foods. Um, and you can see it even with like, if we were to look at immigrants from different parts of the world to other places, they try to make food from their home with the food that they already have. Like American Italian food. It isn't necessarily strictly like traditional Italian, but they tried to make what they could with what they had, and it has become an amazing cuisine that people love. And this is the same with I'm here in America, and so my primary thought is like Chinese American food or Mexican American food, like Tex-Mex, and like all these different things. And it's just really cool that this food isn't just like a nourishment; it's heritage, it's culture, it's me sitting at the table while my mom makes mac and cheese and sausages, or me like complaining to my mom that I want a certain type of food that we may or may not have been able to afford at the time, or whatever it may have been. It's more than just nourishment. Um, and plants play a major factor in that, because it's not just like the main source of energy, it's also the spices in the food. The difference between, like, let's say basil. Basil is a group of plants, but the you can take like sweet basil. That's the one that we use in a lot of Italian food, or you can use holy basil or tulsi, and that's the type of basil that is used in a lot of Indian food. Or there is I'm forgetting the name, but there's a native basil in Africa that they use in um, I don't remember the name, and I don't want to mess that one up. But it's just interesting because they're all a type of basil, but each one has a specific taste that has been utilized for a specific culture, and it's just beautiful that we can see these differences and then experience them. And so it's like, yes, you can look up how to make Mexican rice online, make Mexican rice, and then as you eat it, think about how someone had to have come up with a way to make that and what it meant for their families and their community and all the different things. And so, anyways, um, food is just amazing. And so, it's plants have been closely tied with people for hundreds of years. And these aren't even all of them, actually, because you can look at we can look at construction, right? So construction or food or not. So we can look at construction, right? So the plants that are available in an area for construction is actually pretty useful to look at parts of the culture that developed from it. So we can look at, let's say, what would even be a good example? I guess the most like easy example right now is we can look at um, stick frame houses. How we have this abundant source of wood, and we're able to break down that wood into lumber and then use that for houses, right? But then you can also look at, well, there's different types of wood in different areas, right? So some wood is harder than others, and some wood is softer than others, right? And so, depending on what wood you have available, you may either want to use it, or if there's a lack of wood, you may want to use something else, such as mud or stone, or various means of that, of use for that. And so, it's not just for construction, as in buildings, but also the use of tools, especially with like tools of war. So, depending on whether you had wood that was useful for bows or useful for um, shields or any type of war material, that kind of played a big factor in what weapons you could manufacture, right? If you live in a place and you only have balsa wood, or you only have, what's another bad word for a bow? I can't even think of it right now. But you only have wood that is bad for bow and arrow making, perhaps you lean more towards reeds or grasses um, to make slings, right? And that's your distance type of thing. Or perhaps the wood that you have isn't necessarily bendy, which you would need for a bow, but it is strong and durable. And so you make pole arms or spears. And so it's just interesting because, like, these cultures emerged, and part of what defined the culture and defined who the people are in an area isn't just like the decisions they made, it's also in large part the plants that they had around them. It's in part like this area had immense amounts of bamboo, so they started using bamboo for construction and for tools and for all of these different things. This area over here had willow primarily, or they had oaks, or they had conifers, or they had deciduous trees. And like, if the tree maintains its leaf throughout the years, it gives you a different impression of plants, as if you lived somewhere where trees always lost their leaves every year. And because of that, you develop a different sense of the plants around you. And that kind of feeds into the next part, is the internal aspects, the more like mental and psychological and spiritual aspects that plants have interacted with people for a long time. And so what I really want to talk about on this side is that, one, there's the personal stories. So as for me, as I'm learning about plants and I'm realizing how connected our lives are with them, I start to realize I have personal stories tied to plants. So one of them is that I realized that I wanted to make sure that people had access to flowers in some way. Because, one, my mom always told me that she had this dream of whenever she got married and moved in with my dad, that they would always have flowers on the table. That they would always have flowers, and that to her was one of the signs of success, right? Is that you were able to afford to put money towards something that only looked pretty for a short amount of time. And that is something that was very important to her. And then as I grew up and I started volunteering at a food pantry, giving this bouquet of flowers that was donated from a store that actually had, like, that was like low key not good flowers, right? But handing that flower to this person receiving food at a food pantry, these moms would go to these food pantries, um, but giving them these flowers and just seeing them tear up because they hadn't had flowers given to them for years. Because, like, the thought of spending money that you could spend on food or clothes or electricity or water or whatever was just so out of the question that, like, getting flowers for them or being given flowers by their loved one just wasn't even a consideration. And it's like little things like that, right? Little things like moving to another country, being poor, starting from the ground up, and missing the food from your home, right? Missing the food from where you came from, and having to eat something unfamiliar with you, unfamiliar to your taste buds, things that you just do not experience the same, right? That's personal stories, and it's really interesting because these personal interactions with this food and these, primarily in some way it's plants, they form us. They fundamentally form us. Whether it's like growing up with a big old tree in the background or backyard where you always had shade and you sat under it every summer, or if it's you had land that you cut wood from to keep yourself warm every winter with your fire stove or your wood stove, or if it's your mom had a garden that had flowers in it and you just remember seeing her every day in the morning, spending time with her by herself, tending to her little plants. Or if it's the grass, the soccer field that is free for use at the public in a park, and it's that grass that's been mowed and been taken care of so that you can go in and kick a ball around, and you do that every summer with your friends. Like, whatever it may be, we have these stories tied to plants, and part of the Sunbee mission is that I want to talk to people and learn about these stories and share them, because plants aren't just a new fad, right? Plants aren't a way to just make America green or make the world green or use renewable resources or whatever. Plants are more than just a tool to let us stay alive. They have fundamental connections to our cultures. And so that kind of goes into the folklore. Um, as I've been learning about plants, I've been coming across various folklore, myths, stories revolving around plants. And one of the big series that I've been working on is actually just um, these is talking about these stories and sharing these stories. Right now, I've done a lot of stories on Greek mythology and how there's just various tales about how plants came to be, whether it's Narcissus, um, being a mortal man who scorned the love of Echo and being turned into a daffodil, or if it's Hyacinth, another mortal who fell in love with Apollo, and through jealousy, a Zephyr, one of the wind beings, one of the wind deities, blew a discus off course mid-air and caused it to bounce off the ground and hit Hyacinth in the head, killing him. And whether it's Apollo's tears or Hyacinth's blood, whatever it was that went into the ground and formed Hyacinth, that is the story. And these stories aren't just like random things that don't mean anything. These folklores and these myths tell us a little bit about the people who made them, and I think it's really interesting. I think it's interesting, and it's beautiful, and so I want to learn more about that and share that. And so I've babbled on probably enough. There's also the physical and psychological reactions, which kind of just goes into all of the other stuff that I've shared. But I just wanted to talk about plants for a little bit and talk about how interesting it's been to learn about the connection between plants and people, and how they've connected, and how we as humans are just so connected to plants in ways that we just don't understand in this modern age. And I just want to share that beauty. I want to share that knowledge, and hopefully you'll join me for the rest of the journey. So if you like this kind of stuff and you want to learn more about how horticulture and human culture connect, follow or subscribe, and I would love to hear more stories. I would love to hear your personal story that has stuck with you for however long it's been. Just to share that with me, whether it's email or if you comment it in the comments. I would love to just have you share that with others. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And I didn't really use this board much. I use it for two things. Probably could have written it up there. But yeah, I hope that y'all join me for another video.